very much, Ms. Lofgren. Mr. Gutierrez, welcome to the Rules Committee. We're delighted that Chair Jones.
Thank you, Chairman Sessions and Ranking Member Slaughter, members of the committee. This is the second time in 4 months that I've testified before the Rules Committee on the subject of immigration and immigrants. Unfortunately, not immigration reform, not expanding border security, not making people sure that they can come to this country with a visa instead of smugglers. I haven't come to talk about E-Verify or temporary workers visas or making sure that every undocumented immigrant is registered with the government, which is what I'd like to see happen. No, what we have is yet another symbolic and superficial bill supporting the fantasy that every single undocumented immigrant should simply be deported. The Republican majority is planting its flag firmly on this myth. The myth is that the United States should, would, and could deport 11 million people, and that it would be a good idea for our economy, our security, and our sense of humanity as a leader among civilized nations of the world to do this. Imagine the consequences of the fantasy. First, let's round up 11 million, roughly the population of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and let's round up their children too, the children who are U.S. citizens. There are about 5 million American citizen children whose parents are undocumented. So we'd have to round them up too. And let's put all those children in foster care. Maybe they'd have relatives who would treat them better than the government. Next, when the hundreds of thousands of homes would suddenly all come at the market at one time, all at once, the U.S. government would cope with massive bankruptcies and cries to bail out the U.S. farmers, whose crops would be rotting in the fields of this nation from coast to coast. Then let's detain and put in jail cells the 11 million that we arrested so that we can get them ready for deportation. That means our immigration court just wouldn't have time for anybody else because it takes decades to process 11 million people in our jail system. We'd have to say, sorry, murderers and rapists, you have to wait your turn for deportation because we want to arbitrarily round up and kick out all the moms and dads who are working at car washes and playing ball with their children. And now the courts are full, so you just have to wait. Oh, and don't forget, we'll have to hire and buy fuel for 55,000 airplanes, pack them with 200 immigrants at a time, and fly them out. And not just across the border to Mexico, but to Ireland and Poland and South Korea and continents all over the world. Let's just consider the impact that would have on the Tea Party and the birthers who oppose everything the president is for. When the economy takes a severe hit because the government is removing roughly 5% of the American workforce, that's 1 out of 20 working and consuming and tax-paying people in the U.S. economy, how are we going to feel about the government bailout that's going to be necessary? And how much is the Republican majority willing to raise taxes to pay for deporting 11 million people? 40, 50, $60 billion? Yes, the Republican Party is betting the farm on the idea that the American people think deporting all 11 million people is not only realistic, but a desirable idea. And in this case, when I say betting the farm, I mean it quite literally. The entire American farm and agricultural industry and millions of farm workers, grocery stores, and families at kitchen tables are going to be turned upside down because the majority is suggesting that the status quo of de facto amnesty is somehow upholding the rule of law. But when the Republicans insist that we cannot fix our immigration system and restore the rule of law legislatively, the alternative they leave is chaos. That is what we are left with when every effort to address the problems and the hardships that our broken immigration system causes for American citizens is rejected. Even something as sensible as when the Department of Homeland Security says we will make the deportation of parents of U.S. citizens our lowest priority if they pay for and pass a criminal background check at their own expense. Look, if we're serious about the rule of law, then we should have spent yesterday's judiciary hearing marking up an immigration reform bill, and we should spend today's Rules Committee hearing determining which amendments would be ruled in order. That is what is going to give us border security, an immigration bill. That's what's going to give us E-Verify in every workplace, an immigration bill. That's what's going to defend the American worker from the current system with two separate but unequal labor markets where only some of American workforce is covered by American labor laws. And that is what is going to get millions of our neighbors and friends who have lived here for years to come forward, register with the government, give up their fingerprints, prove they're not a threat, and prove they will support their families and pay their taxes. That is the way forward, and all of the rest of this is incredibly wasteful theater that makes the American people say, what are those people in Washington doing? Because they're surely not taking action to help Americans and their family. I urge the Rules Committee to schedule a hearing on immigration reform. Because I want to join Mr. Chairman Goodlatte. I want to join Zoe, who spent decades working on this issue. I want to join all of us on resolving the problem. The rest is unfortunately simply theater.